The power of doubt. Who was Sextus Empiricus? Sextus Empiricus, a name that sounds more like a Roman gladiator who moonlighted as a librarian than a serious philosopher. But fear not, dear reader, for Sextus was a man of the quill, not the gladius. He was the ancient world's ultimate party pooper, the guy who, when everyone else was passionately arguing about the true nature of reality, would simply shrug and say, "Meh, who knows?" And you know what? That shrug was revolutionary. Sextus Empiricus was a physician, which might seem strange for a philosopher who advocated for not knowing anything. You'd think a doctor would need to be pretty sure about what ails you before he starts prescribing leeches. But this medical background actually informed his philosophical outlook. He wasn't just some armchair skeptic, he was a practical one. He saw the dogmatic squabbles of the Stoics, Epicureans, and Platonists as intellectual diseases. His remedy? A healthy dose of doubt. He didn't claim that nothing existed or that we couldn't know anything. That would be, in his own mind, a dogmatic claim. Instead, he was an epistemological agnostic. He said, "I don't know if we can know anything, so I'll just hold my horses." He was the philosophical equivalent of a cat, eternally curious, but ultimately unimpressed. He'd sit there watching the other philosophers build their elaborate castles of truth, and then, with a flick of his tail, he'd knock it all down with a single elegant question. How do you know that? And the best part? He wouldn't even wait for an answer. He'd just move on, leaving the dogmatists in a state of bewildered intellectual rubble. Sextus wasn't a philosopher in the traditional sense, he was more of a philosophical therapist. He saw the anxiety and conflict that came with trying to find absolute truth and offered a cure, ataraxia, or a state of mental tranquility. He promised that if you stopped worrying about the big questions, you'd find peace. He was the ancient world's first life coach, but instead of telling you to manifest your truth, he'd tell you to suspend your judgment. And honestly, in a world of endless Twitter debates and philosophical shouting matches, maybe that's a piece of advice we all need to take to heart. Suspension of judgment, the skeptic's path to peace. Ever feel like your brain is a hamster wheel of anxious thoughts, spinning endlessly on questions you can't answer? Welcome to the human condition, my friend. But fear not, for Sextus Empiricus, the ancient world's most chill philosopher, has a solution. Epoche, or the suspension of judgment. Now, this isn't about being indecisive about what to have for dinner. This is about putting a giant philosophical "I'm not sure" sticker on the entire universe. Imagine a debate. One person says the ultimate reality is a bunch of tiny atoms bumping into each other. Another says it's an unchanging, perfect form of the good. And you, the humble skeptic, sit there and listen. You see the compelling arguments on both sides. You also see the flaws. You see the assumptions, the leaps of faith, the intellectual gymnastics. A dogmatist would have to pick a side, but not you. You, the skeptic, simply say, interesting points. I'm not convinced by either, and I don't see a reason to choose. And then you walk away, your mind blissfully free from the burden of having to be right. This is the power of epoche. It's not about being a know-nothing. It's about being a know enough to know that I don't know. It's the ultimate intellectual freedom. Think of it as a mental vacation.
While the dogmatists are sweating it out in the intellectual salt mines, digging for nuggets of absolute truth, you're lounging on a philosophical beach, sipping a metaphorical pina colada of doubt. But what's the point of all this? The point, my dear reader, is peace. Sextus believed that the root of all human suffering was the belief that we knew things we didn't. We argue, we fight, we get anxious because we're convinced our worldview is the correct one. But if you suspend judgment, if you recognize the inherent uncertainty in all things, you can stop fighting. You can stop worrying. You can achieve ataraxia, that sweet, sweet state of unperturbed tranquility. It's a bit like giving up on a puzzle you can't solve. The moment you stop trying to force the pieces together, you feel a massive sense of relief. And that, in a nutshell, is the skeptic's path to peace.
Against the dogmatists, Sextus and philosophical skepticism. The ancient world was a vibrant and often noisy marketplace of ideas. You had the Stoics with their steely resolve and belief in a rational cosmos. You had the Epicureans who just wanted to chill out and eat good food. And then you had the Platonists who were obsessed with perfect forms and shadows on a cave wall. It was a dogmatic free-for-all, with each school claiming to have the ultimate answer to life, the universe, and everything. Enter Sextus Empiricus, the ultimate philosophical buzzkill. He wasn't a fan of the dogmatists. He saw them as intellectual bullies, people who claimed to have all the answers and demanded you accept their version of the truth. Sextus, being the iconoclast he was, decided to poke holes in all of their balloons. He didn't offer an alternative balloon, he just enjoyed watching theirs deflate. His method was simple but devastating. He would take a dogmatic claim and then present a conflicting, equally plausible claim. He'd show how the evidence for one position could be reinterpreted to support another. He'd point out the circular reasoning, the unproven assumptions, and the sheer intellectual hubris of it all. He wasn't trying to prove them wrong. That would be, ironically, a dogmatic act itself. He was simply trying to show that their claims were, at best, unproven, and at worst, completely baseless. Think of it like a debate where one person says, the sky is blue because of tiny blue sky particles, and another says, no, the sky is blue because of an invisible blue sky wizard. Sextus would step in and say, interesting, you both have compelling, yet unprovable theories. I'll just acknowledge that the sky appears blue, but I'm not going to get involved in the theological debate of whether it's particles or wizards. He was the ultimate intellectual Switzerland, refusing to take a side in the philosophical wars. Sextus's skepticism wasn't about being cynical or negative. It was a tool of liberation. He believed that the dogmatic pursuit of truth was a source of endless anxiety and conflict. By demonstrating the inherent uncertainty in all dogmatic claims, he hoped to free people from the intellectual chains of certainty. He wanted them to find peace not in believing something, but in not having to believe anything at all. He was the original agree to disagree philosopher, but on a cosmic scale. Can we truly know anything? Sextus Empiricus and epistemology. Epistemology. It sounds like the name of a character in a sci-fi movie, but it's just a fancy word for the study of knowledge. It's the part of philosophy where we ask the big, brain-bending questions like, what is knowledge? And how do we know that we know? And in this particular playground of the mind, Sextus Empiricus was the kid who sat in the corner, building a sandcastle of doubt while everyone else was arguing about the true nature of the swing set. Sextus's contribution to epistemology was less of a theory and more of a demolition. He didn't offer a new way of knowing, he just meticulously and gleefully dismantled every other way.
He was a master of the modes of skepticism, a series of arguments designed to show the inherent limitations of human reason and perception. He'd start with perception. Can we trust our senses? He'd point out that a honey badger perceives the world differently than a human, or that what feels hot to one person feels warm to another. He'd show that our senses are relative and unreliable. And if we can't trust our senses, how can we build a foundation of knowledge on them? Then he'd move on to reason. Can we use logic to arrive at truth? He'd show how every logical argument rests on premises that are either unproven or circular. He'd demonstrate the endless regress of justification. You justify A with B, B with C, C with D, and so on, until you're left with an infinite chain of assumptions. He'd show that even our most rigorous reasoning is built on a house of cards. Sextus wasn't saying that our brains were useless or that we should just give up. He was simply pointing out that the traditional dogmatic claims about knowledge, well, a little bit flimsy. He wasn't a skeptic who said nothing can be known. Instead, he was a skeptic who said, I don't see a compelling reason to believe that anything can be known with absolute certainty. He was a pragmatist in the truest sense of the word. He believed we should live our lives according to appearances, what seems to be the case, without making dogmatic claims about what is truly the case. It's a bit like driving a car. You don't need to know the fundamental physics of internal combustion to get from point A to point B. You just need to know that when you press the gas pedal, the car goes. Ancient skepticism in modern thought. Sextus revisited. You might think that the ramblings of an ancient Greek-speaking physician-philosopher are about as relevant as a sundial in the age of smartwatches. But you'd be wrong. Sextus Empiricus, the master of doubt, has a ghost that haunts the halls of modern thought, whispering his skeptical questions into the ears of our most brilliant minds. His influence can be seen everywhere. In the sciences, his skepticism about the absolute certainty of knowledge echoes in the modern understanding of scientific theories. We no longer see a theory like evolution as an immutable, eternal truth. We see it as the best explanation we have, a model that is constantly being refined and challenged. A modern scientist, when asked if a theory is true, would likely give a very Sextus-like answer. It's the most compelling explanation given the current evidence, but all theories are subject to revision. In philosophy, his ghost is even more present. Think of the postmodernists, who question the very idea of grand narratives and absolute truths. Think of the existentialists, who grapple with the lack of inherent meaning in a universe without a benevolent designer. And in our everyday lives, his influence is felt in our healthy skepticism of media headlines, political claims, and even the facts we see on social media. Sextus's skepticism wasn't just an intellectual exercise. It was a way of life. It was a rejection of the idea that we need to have all the answers to be happy. In our modern world, we are constantly bombarded with information and opinions, and we're told we need to have a stance on everything. We are encouraged to be dogmatic, to be certain, to be right. But Sextus offers us a different path. He offers us the freedom of not knowing. He gives us permission to say, I'm not sure, and to be okay with that. So, the next time you're feeling overwhelmed by the endless debates and unresolvable questions of the modern world, just remember Sextus Empiricus. Imagine him sitting there with a gentle, knowing smirk, and just suspend your judgment. Breathe, and remember that the power of doubt might just be the most liberating force in the universe.